Teachers of Reddit, they say there are no stupid questions, but what's the most stupid question a student has ever asked you? 10th grade honors chemistry, topic is states of matter. What would liquid ice be called? We're still not sure if he was making a joke about the short-lived icebreakers mints liquid ice because everyone was laughing too hard. More of a statement that prompted a whole discussion when I was student teaching. To set the stage, I would like to point out that I am white and my leading teacher was African American, and the classroom was about 60% African American, 30% Latino, and the remaining 10% a mixture of Asian and white. This was also my advanced class and we were discussing the apartheid in Africa. Me. So the black Africans and white Africans. Student raises hand. Miss Ducky, you can't say that. Me. Say what? Student. Black. It's African American. Me. Trying my hardest to not die a little inside. No, that is actually not the correct phrase. Can anyone tell me why African American is not the correct term for this situation? Silence. Me. Okay guys, look at it this way. Are we talking about Americans? Number. We are not. We are talking about a racial issue in Africa with no relation to America at all. The definition of African American is a person of African descent living in America. So if the people we are talking about are not American, they cannot be African American, can they? So to talk about the racial issue, the labels used are black Africans and white Africans, as outlined by our textbook. Student. Number. You can't say that. They are African American. At this point my lead teacher is face palming. She is in total disbelief, and as much as she loved to watch me struggle, she stepped in and tried to explain it as well. 20 minutes go by of the two of us trying our best. The bell rings. The kids still couldn't figure it out. I think we both nearly cried. In my senior year of high school I was in a personal finance class. The teacher explained that not paying your taxes could get you incarcerated. Student. So if you don't pay your taxes, the government will light you on fire. Teacher. No. Incarcerated means to imprison. You're thinking of incinerated. Student. Oh. Wait. Then what's taxidermy? Taxidermy is a bonus skin treatment you get from the IRS if you do your taxes just right. What happens if a girl pees during sex? Does it push the guy out like a geyser? From a 17-year-old girl who was doing well in biology. We had a solid argument for 15 minutes on how many holes a girl has. Sex ed class. Is breast milk 1% or 2%? We were looking at the Japanese flag and a kid asked, is that why they wear that dot on their forehead? Dot on their forehead. It is traditionally worn by Indian, Hindu married women and it symbolizes that everything the husband does or says is being recorded and archived and can be used by them against them in any conversation for the next 30-40 years. I was a lifeguard on a beach. Man with a very thick Chicago accent asked me where the switch was to turn off the waves, so he could let his daughter go out and play in the water. So I told him it was at my boss stand. I would have pointed at the moon. How old was the average 18-year-old in 1942? He then managed to forget he was wearing his own glasses and asked everybody where they were. 20, give or take a couple years. A classmate of mine asked if Asia was a town in China, and, assuming that she was right, said that it was crazy that so many people from our school came from one town. She was so wrong. Everyone knows Asia is an 80s rock band. Grade 5 sex ed. I hate a rule that any question can be asked, but I might ask you to ask your parents instead of me. I heard a story about a man who put his stuff into muffins and fed it to grade 1 kids. Well, that is pretty disgusting and I would think that person would go to jail for doing that. Wouldn't the girls get pregnant from eating it? And before I could say anything another student blurted out, no, they wouldn't get pregnant. They haven't gone through puberty yet. I am thankful for days when kids remind me that they are still kids. My wife is the teacher, but this is my favorite story of hers. They were discussing how Native Americans relied on hunting buffalo and used all parts of it for food, clothing, shelter, etc. In reference to how they use the buffalo for shelter, one student asked, so do they stack the buffalo on top of each other? Buffalo go. Taught English literature in a juvenile justice long-term treatment facility. I have many great stories. Me. This is a map of the United States. Here is the Midwest. It's where your math teacher is from. Student, oh snap. We're in a war with them. Me, are you thinking about the Middle East? Student, oh yeah, is that a different place? Me, playing a trivia game with students. Johannes Gutenberg invented what? Student, shoots his hand up in the air quickly before I even finish the question and very sure of his answer. Cheese. Student, reading The Three Little Pigs out loud, and the big bad wolf huffed and he puffed, and he passed it around. Me, I've never heard of that version of the story before, Mr. Student, you wouldn't. Mr. Ellipsis, it's the hood version. Had a student ask me what are those pyramid-shaped things in Egypt called? Never seen a class laugh that hard before. Warm spring day, no account. Fan blowing in the front of the room. Hand goes up. Can you make the fan ovulate? Number, no, I can't. I'm a corporate trainer, so hopefully this counts. I used to train content for an exam that everyone in our field must take to get licensed. If you didn't pass, you had to go back through the course. Well, I had a dude go through my class 4 times. 4. Here's the conversation we had before his 3rd exam. Guy, what attempt am I on? Me, wait, what? Guy, well, I've taken the test twice, but everyone else in here hasn't taken it, so am I taking my test for the first time or the 3rd time? Me, what do you think? Guy, I don't know, that's why I'm asking you. Dude thought that he might be on his first attempt because he was back in a class with a bunch of people who were on theirs. I was a maths teacher. One day a student, apropos of nothing, right at the start of the class looked me dead in the eyes and asked me, how did Jesus nail his other hand to the cross? He then began miming the impossible task, musing over whether he had a hammer on a rope in his mouth and swung his head side to side to insert the final nail. He didn't, I replied. Oh, said the student with a long pause. That makes sense. That is the story of my one stupid question. How old do you have to be to smoke crack? A fellow student at Waukegan circa 1988. I used to volunteer teaching at an after-school program for 14-year-olds. We were doing a project that involved balloons. One boy had blown his balloon but couldn't get it tied. I tied it and gave it back to him. He immediately tossed it up. As it sank to the floor, his face fell, obviously disappointed. He asked, "Oh, so they're not helium?" He really was a sweet kid, but he definitely had his fair share of these kinds of moments. Or that's actually sad in the sweet "oh, you idiot" kind of way, like he thought helium was a type of balloon and not a gas. If the patient have a brain hemorrhage, can we do a tourniquet on the neck to stop it? Well, I mean, technically yes. As part of teaching US government, I ran a zombie apocalypse scenario where the students had to respond to an ongoing crisis in real time using the actual powers of the government as different parts of the government. It was my favorite activity all semester and I went all in, including with a large map of the US that would be updated for every day that passed. As part of this activity, I prepared a handout of a fake news story about the zombie apocalypse beginning in our hometown. It had pictures of zombies shambling around and was written all newspaper style. One day, after handing these out, an 18-year-old student raised their hand and said, "Mr. Crosage, did this really happen?" My mom is a teacher's assistant in a 5th grade class. A few weeks ago a girl asked, "Are bears still real?" And some things that should not have been forgotten were lost. History became legend. Legend became myth. And for 2,500 years, the bear passed out of all knowledge. How do islands not float away? Really big anchors. He wrote it down. I had an assignment for biology where you'd flip a coin to see what traits your baby dragon would have to teach Mendelian genetics. One of my students raised her hand and asked, "Wait, so dragons are real?" As a high school biology teacher, a 16-year-old student once asked me, "Wait, aren't rhinos made of mud?" At least he knows his Pokemon types. After informing my West African class about the Boston bombing, is Little Wayne okay? After a lengthy explanation of the effects of volcanic eruptions on human communities, I had a grade 6 student ask me why on earth people even make volcanic eruptions. Tourism. It's the best move the Hawaiians and Icelanders have ever made. I'm not a teacher, but in 8th grade I had a classmate argue that Martin Luther King freed the slaves. When I tried to correct her, she flipped out and started screaming, name calling, etc. He didn't free the slaves. He wrote the Bible. My wife went to school to be a HS history teacher, and when she had her semester of student teaching, one of the students asked if China had grass, while another who insisted that windmills made wind. Windmills do not work that way. Good night. From a friend who is a grade school teacher. When will my pea start growing hair? Plot twist. The student was a male. I am slightly concerned for this child's home life. This came up all the time when teaching kids how to do their taxes. I must have had this conversation a dozen times. Student: so I don't know what to do at this part. Me: what does the instruction say on that line? Student: add box 23 and 24 and write the answer here. Me: so add box 23 and 24. I to this day have no idea how you teach someone to follow very explicit instructions. Whoa, they didn't teach taxes to me in school. When I was in high school in health class, while going over reproduction, there was a fellow student who raised her hand and asked if you were sterile. Could you pass it on to your children? The whole class giggled and she, confused, said she was serious. She wanted to know if you're sterile, could you pass it on to your kids? The teacher, with a smile, said to her, okay, let's think about this. What does it mean to be sterile? She began answering, it means that you can't have KOHHHHH. Followed by another round of laughter from the rest of the class. To her credit, they are finding that people conceived using IVF are having difficulty having children of their own as adults. So not completely a dumb question, depending if you mean completely sterile or unable to reproduce unassisted. At university I had a classmate that would often show up 20 minutes late to class. The first thing he did after sitting down was raise his hand to ask questions about what the professor had just said. Question after question until he had caught up with the rest of the class. Absolutely infuriating. That's a bad professor who allowed that. In 7th grade science class during sex ed they were talking about oral sex. Mormon girl in class: wait, you can get an STD just from talking about sex. I wouldn't call the question stupid. Just no exposure at all to the topic beforehand. I once projected a picture of the Earth onto the front whiteboard. A student asked, how do astronauts stand on a planet like that? The same way we all are standing on the moon right now. There's one I'll never forget. What? Einstein is dead? This was a GCSE class. 15-16-year-olds. 9th grade Ella. A few chapters into Of Mice and Men. What kind of work does George do on the farm? I'm not sure. Probably the same work that everyone else is doing. Oh, it must be hard for him to help out, since he's a mouse. I'm a federal budget analyst and had to train a new employee who had apparently been working in budgets for 20 years or so should have been able to quickly pick things up. She wasn't. When I finally got her on the right track with our year-end financial reports, I told her she was close but her numbers were off, so double check them. She responded with, well, wouldn't someone else just fix that? Oh no, that's exactly what you get paid to do. So you need to put the correct numbers in the report so we can publish it. What on earth would we do with almost correct financial reports? The next day she just couldn't figure it out, and I said, you're really close. It's probably just rounding, she said. Does it matter? How do you know when you should round it up or down? I said, yes it matters. Just use normal rounding rules. She asked what those are. I very slowly said, you know, 0.5 or higher your roundup. She had never been familiarized with that apparently. In the end I really felt like I would have been better off teaching a 3rd grader. A girl in my honors science class asked the teacher, and was 100% serious, if ramen grew on ramen trees. Yes, up on Macaroni Hill. While I was student teaching, I had a student ask where Texas was on the map I was projecting on the screen. The map was of China. So the map was zoomed in a bit to the east. The kid was just trying to help you find the safe house. At the college midterm, I had a guy comes up to me that I've never seen in class. He proceeded to ask me what his grade is. Checked the sheet. He never turned in a single piece of homework, no quizzes, never attended a test. What did you think you'd have? You've got a solid F. When I was in high school, the same student asked, where is the Great Wall of China? Aren't the sun and moon the same thing? That guy with the Hitler mustache, did he win? Yes, Charlie Chaplin won us all. This was a question my teacher asked a student in my philosophy class. Community college. Teacher, if it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, then it must be. Points at random student for an answer. Random student. Man, I have no idea. Ugh, this freaking kid. I'm sure everyone has one in their grade. The type that is told his answer is wrong but somehow won't accept it and defends his factually wrong answer with the weirdest bull's logic. It was the year that the game Fable came out and the slogan was for every decision, a million outcomes. This kid was in my 9th grade English class and we were learning about actual fables. This kid asks the teacher, doesn't the word fable mean for a single decision, there's a million outcomes? Cue everyone in the class slowly turning their heads to look at him. The teacher said no, a fable is a short story or tale used to establish or show ethics and morals, something along those lines, aka the actual meaning of the word fable. The kid goes, oh, well I think you're wrong cause there's this game that came out and in the commercials it says for every decision there's a million outcomes. The teacher and this kid literally argued about the meaning of the word fable for like half an hour in class and everyone's telling the kid he's wrong and he refuses to accept it because the commercial said otherwise. He didn't actually use the word otherwise. I am sure that it's out of his vocabulary range, but he refused to relent. Fricking Ryan. Shut the frick up. History teacher said Magna Carta and this one girl opens her mouth and says excuse me it's manga. I hope she thinks back on that and cringes a little. Do Chinese people think in English? Wait, what? Had a pupil ask me if the sun they saw in America was the same as the sun we saw here in Scotland, and why was their sun so much warmer. Living in Scotland, this one isn't hard to believe. I teach martial arts to little kids. I had a kid ask me if he could punch his mom now. Like this video, but do it quietly so you don't wake up the sleeping papa. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.